Hi, my name is Michael Gilmore and I'm the writer of WizBank's blog. And today I'm going to be taking a look once again at our weekly update of the impact of COVID-19 on the PPC market, in particular of domainers earning money from their domain traffic. Now, there's a lot of you who do that, and I think, in fact, most domainers would want to be able to get something from their domain traffic. So is COVID-19 actually impacting us very, very much? A few things I want to say for a start is we've always been anticipating there'd be a downturn at ParkLogic here, and that suddenly there'd be like the advertisers vacated the market and all that sort of stuff. And the interesting thing is that we really haven't seen that. And in fact, we've seen the reverse. And remember in past videos, I've actually talked about the fact that back in March, I was thinking maybe this would sort of correct itself into April as the new budgets came online and we see a collapse downwards. We didn't see that. We didn't see that at all. Then I thought, well, maybe it was Easter. We saw a bit of a downturn for Easter, if you remember from the previous videos. And that was sort of like, I was getting a bit nervous. Well, what's going to happen here? And it bounced back up, which was a great surprise. Like I must admit, it was a really big surprise, and one that I was obviously endlessly happy about. But at the same time, I keep on waiting for it to go down, but it's not. Then there's some companies that have released some of their earnings reports in the advertising space, and a friend of mine just sent me through a message saying, "You're right, it's actually going up," which has been interesting. It's interesting for multiple fronts. One is a company like ParkLogic, we get a leading indicator on the effects of online advertising on stock market type results, companies in the stock market. But more than that, it's confirmation that what we're seeing is likely to be sustainable. Now, I kept on saying that I think that a lot of the reasons for this has been due to the small businesses coming online and the fact that the big business has frozen their budgets, and they weren't spending up as what they used to. But the small businesses, there's just so many of them, are saying, hey, we've got to sell a product somewhere. We've got to go online rather than selling it in our store. And so they've really focused on that, and they've been buying up the traffic. They've more than made up for the loss of the big business. The question I have going through my mind, though, now is that as COVID begins to normalize and so forth like that, and by the way, it's terrible what's happening in the US right now, that as that occurs, that are we going to see, as the big businesses come back online, are we going to see even a greater demand for online traffic, which is just all good news for those who've invested in domain monetization. But that's yet in the future. But right now, when we take a look at last week's numbers and see what's actually happened there, because there's some really interesting stuff there. Okay then, right, without further ado, let's move across to the numbers. And so COVID-19 impact week 6. We can't believe that it's week 6 already. And for those of you who have been suffering in quarantine, it's not a pretty experience. But then again, there's always Netflix and some of those other great companies that we can hopefully entertain ourselves through this period. But then again, there's YouTube videos like this one, which will be transformational, hopefully, for your own business. So what's actually occurred here to the normalized RPM and RPM? Now, these are overall numbers I've pulled from our system. And if you look at the RPM is on the left axis, the normalized RPM is on the right axis. The normalized RPM will always be less than the RPM because the normalized RPM is using more raw traffic figures compared to what's reported back from our advertising partners. But you can see there that the red, or the RPM, has taken in the last week, it's actually taken a step up again. Although it's bumping around a little bit, it's definitely taking a step back up. And the normalized RPM, though, has been really all over the place in that area. So it's a real challenge to be able to work out what's going on. Now, we see a huge trend upwards of the normalized RPM, and that could be caused by a variety of different factors, including obviously any filters being applied to traffic and so forth like that. But even with those filters applied, you can see there that other than that great big spike up, there's definitely that trend upwards, which is something I'm pretty happy about. So if we go to our next chart, EPC and click-through rate, once again, compared to, say, the beginning of April, you could see straight away that this last week, there's definitely been a step up in EPCs and also CTR. And which suggests, in many respects, that people are clicking more and also advertisers are paying more. So if advertisers are paying more, it's because people are clicking more. Typically speaking, what we've always seen across the last 13 years of ParkLogic is there's been an inverse relationship between CTR and EPC. So as CTR has gone up, EPC has gone down. And you may say, well, why is that the case? Simply, to be quite blunt with you, I think a lot of it's to do with a manipulation of the data. And it's what we're seeing, but it's like Google smart pricing and different the way advertisers are responding and so forth like that. So, which is a little bit disconcerting. But this time this last week, we've seen a step up for both the CTR and the EPC. I'll bet it's for the CTR, which is the blue line, has been stepped up only a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look at the overall volatility. Now, I keep on coming back to this, and people have asked me some questions. What do you mean by volatility? I mean changes in normalized RPM of comparing Monday versus a previous Monday, Tuesday versus a previous Tuesday, and so forth. But there's one thing that stands out, and that is there's been some big swings compared to the previous week. And that could be because the previous week was quite big, but we've gone into negative territory there overall for normalized RPM. And so it's dropped down a few times. And remember, anything green, and I've highlighted the charts in green there, is we're having increasing a normalized RPM. Anything in red is decreasing. Now remember, it's decreasing off really quite a big high. But so let's take a look at the next chart. What is happening in the split between Google and also direct advertisers? Now, one of the things that I was particularly interested in this chart is this last few data points. The last few data points looks like the beginning of a trend of the direct advertisers beginning to fight back against Google and to secure more of the traffic. Now, I'm going to be interested in next week's charts to see whether that continues on. And if that continues on, then that's great news for the direct advertisers, not so good for Google in that regard. But it's all about exploiting that who's going to pay the most for the traffic, and that's what we do, and that's what we've been doing for so long. So, but it does look definitely like a trend, and so let's move on to the normalized RPM. This is Google versus direct advertisers, normalized RPM. And you can see there that this has really been all over the place. Now, we need to be very careful with this chart. The Google axis is the left axis, and Google is the blue line. So using the left-hand axis, the direct advertiser, the right-hand axis. And I think the previous week I neglected to label the axis. So I just want to be very clear on that. So if you look at the axes for a start, the direct advertisers are typically paying 10 times more for the traffic than Google, but they're only doing it in certain market verticals. And so they're really, really honing in on valuable verticals. But despite that, you can see just there is that there's a incredible trend on the. I put the Google trend line in. I probably should have put the direct advertisers too in there. But there's been a really big swing upwards in normalized RPM. Now, once again, we'll see if that is sustainable. if it continues on moving forward. And I can only hope that it will. It would be great if it does continue on. But that's all good news so far. So let's take a look at the final chart just here, which is the volatility of Google versus direct advertisers. And you'll see that in the last week, once again, cast your eye to the very last week, the direct advertisers have been bouncing around the 100% line, which in other words, there's been no change in terms of volatility. Google, on the other hand, swung really high, has maintained that. So it kept on stepping up and stepping up and stepping up on day after day after day, comparing one weekday versus a previous weekday. And then it's collapsed back down again. Now you may say, well, what does that mean? It's collapsed back down. What it means is that it wasn't, the change of increase upwards wasn't sustainable. Therefore, it dropped back down. So in other words, we've had, say something like Monday was a 1, Tuesday was a 1, 1, 1, 1, but the following week it went to 1.1 for the Monday, and so therefore, rather than suddenly jumping up, it's collapsed back. So that it's the rate of change is really gone down. And that's to be expected. You can't have it continually going upwards all the time. But so this the charts are really telling me that number one is we're in a world right now where people are going online. So we've seen a massive increase in traffic. Number one. Number two, we've seen a world where advertisers are demanding traffic, and they're wanting more traffic. Now, the interesting thing is, as I said at the beginning of this video, it's not necessarily the big guys on the block. They've frozen a lot of them have frozen their budgets, like Amazon and so forth. But it's more the masses of small businesses coming online. And that's really sustaining the earnings per click rate and the competition, the auction systems and so forth like that for earnings per click. Now, so we've seen a big trend upwards in those numbers. And that's been really exciting to see that. Now, is this sustainable? That is the question we need to really ask. I think it is sustainable. The more I look at these numbers, the more I'm seeing there's a sense of inevitable sustainability about them. And I think the reason why is because COVID-19 has changed the world. It really has. COVID-19 has changed the way people behave. They're shopping online a lot more readily. I even look at my parents who, for the first time ever, were buying the groceries online. And I look at some of the market segments where there was a great surge forward for buying, obviously, medical equipment, but there's also things like TVs, large screen TVs, games, ways of entertaining yourself while in quarantine, all that sort of stuff. But now I think it's beginning to move beyond that as people become familiar with, you know what, I can buy something on my computer and it actually does turn up. And I think that change is beginning to get ingrained into society. And as this time goes on, people become more and more familiar, and that's only good news for domain investors. It's only good news. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Cautiously optimistic is probably the best way to think of this. And I know at ParkLogic, our clients are seeing some great numbers coming through, and we picked up a whole lot of really good-sized clients, which is wonderful. So if you're sitting there, you're thinking, I'm not seeing these numbers you're seeing, Michael, then give me a call and we can have a chat about this, because these numbers are straight from our systems, and I'd love to be able to talk to you further about it. But anyway, I hope you found this video interesting, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future, or hearing from you in some respect. Thanks a lot for that. Bye. Hi, I hope you enjoyed that video and that you find this information that I'm providing through my blog and through these videos really interesting. Don't forget, subscribe, whatever you subscribe, so you don't miss out on the next installment I'm going to be releasing. Or you can click on the push alerts on the website. So either two, but anyway, thanks a lot. Bye.